Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
So, Tory, welcome. Official opening of the podcast, even though we've been yakking for like 50 minutes.
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So let's get started talking author stuff. Tell us a little bit about you and who you are outside of writing, outside of your book.
I'm two things. I'm retired Air Force. I did 22 years in the Air Force, retired about 10 years ago. And I decided my last year in the Air Force, I was going to start getting more into fitness. So I went and got certified as a fitness trainer and kind of been doing that since. But at the same time, I also decided I wanted to write the stuff I love to read, which is sci-fi kind of action adventure stuff. So my last year in the Air Force, I started writing and then quickly learned how much I didn't know about writing. Spent the next 10 years learning about writing.
Nice. Well, I'll get back to that in 2 seconds because I have a great question on that one. Okay. So the fitness, you and I were talking about this off the air, so to say. Tell everyone a little bit about what you're doing with that, where you're going with your fitness.
Well, I've always been fit, and to be in the military, you kind of have to maintain a certain fitness level. But my dad died early from cancer, and I think that kind of helped me get more serious about my own fitness. So I got into more fitness, and then I started thinking, once I got out of the Air Force, I'm like, what am I going to do? I did have a business degree that I really wasn't interested in using. So I just got certified and started doing personal training and then more into group training. And that's what I've been doing ever since here in Spokane, at Fairchild Air Force Base and a local gym down the road here. So a lot of classes, HIIT style and cycling, and then, one-on-one training. My specialty, my stuff I have to concentrate on is weight loss. So fat weight loss, help people lose weight and move better, basically is what I concentrate on.
And we were talking, we're both 50-ish, especially for people at our age group. If you've led a sedentary life, now it's starting to catch up to you and you need to. And that also affects a lot of authors because obviously you're going to be sitting a lot if you write.
Exactly. And I'm developing a online fitness course with authors very much in mind.
I love that because that's what this is all about, authors.
Yep,
so
exactly.
Besides the fitness, you said you got into writing. You've spent a large part of the last 10 years learning to write. And I find that significant because we've probably both been on the forums, listened to other podcasts with authors like, well, I just sat down over the weekend and wrote my first 3,000 or 300,000 word book. Now, how do I publish it? So why did you want to get into writing, but you chose to learn? You said, obviously you said, that you learned that there's things you don't know, but I don't think a lot of people get that. So I guess what I'm asking is, why did you spend so much time learning rather than putting something out there already?
That's a really interesting question. I've had 10 years to reflect, but I distinctly recall the first time I sat down to start writing, this kind of half-baked idea. I realized that I had no idea how to even get started, let alone finish something. So I started taking some notes, and I started looking at, where can I get more information? And that was about the time, this is in 2009, that, the indie author had concept had kind of just started. We had the Kindle and the iPad that were really cool ideas for ebooks. I used to have a ton of books, and in the military you move a lot, so I found myself every 3 years packing up like 200 or 300 books, in boxes and moving them wherever. That's a lot of weight and effort. Um, because books are cool. I love the artwork. That's why I collected books, really, for the stories and then the artwork. But that wasn't sustainable. I love the idea of having all my books on a device. But I also realized that there's lots of magazine articles, and then there was podcasts, and then there were blogs. So I started looking for all of those to learn how to write. All different things, subjects on the craft of writing. And that's kind of where it started. And actually, it started back when I started. Let me backtrack a little bit. I decided to start writing because every blurb back cover copy I read sounded the same. It was basically, the hero saves Earth from aliens. Every back cover sounded the same. I'm like, there's got to be more to life than this. I now realize why they all sounded the same, but at the time I'm like, I'm tired of the same. I want something different. So that's when I decided to write my own stuff. And now here we are 10 years later. It took me a while to get there. So I took my time to learn piece by piece. I have a thick skull, so it takes a while for me. But once I learn it pretty good. And I just kept practicing, kept writing a little bit here and there. It took me about 4 years to write the first book. And that's because, I still had a day job. So it wasn't my primary, occupation sort of thing. And I wasn't making money at it yet. So there's no big rush. You know what I mean? So
right.
That's how it all got started.
And I think a lot of authors that would listen to this podcast are in the same boat. Have a day job, want to write, but feel, everybody is so far beyond me. Everybody's better than me. And that's not true. You started just like everyone else at the beginning. And I think that's great. Also, sometimes people think, oh, I have to have an MFA or some degree. Well, you were in the Air Force, you had a business degree, nothing to do with writing fiction. The resources are out there to learn all of this, it seems now, with books and podcasts and the internet.
They weren't directly related. And I learned early on, I think it was specifically from Joanna Penn's podcast, that you don't have to do it overnight.
Right.
There's nobody saying you have to write and publish, in 30 days. You can take your time, learn what you want to do, learn what you want to learn, enjoy the process along the way. It's the same thing with fitness. People don't get overweight overnight, and they don't lose weight overnight. It takes a while. And I tell my clients, learn to enjoy the journey, not the destination.
Right. Yeah.
That's how I approached it.
And it's funny you say that, because I always laughed when I was younger, mostly working in the office. You'd get the ladies that would say, oh, we're exercising at lunch. Then you'd see them in the parking lot, and they'd walk around the parking lot like 3 times, talking the whole time, and then say, well, we worked out. And then they'd eat a candy bar as a reward. Or they would say, well, I walked in the parking lot yesterday and I didn't lose a single pound. That's not how it works.
Nope.
You really have to kind of get into it to understand that. I think writing now is kind of the same thing. People think, oh, I'll write a book, everyone will clamber to my door, and I'll be super rich. And that's the same people that then get on all the forums and stuff saying, hey, go buy my book. And there's 3,000 people going, hey, we all wrote one ourselves, go away.
Right.
I love that you took the time to really get into it and learn about it without feeling like you had to get a degree.
Well, I kind of went into it not knowing either side of that issue. But after listening to Joanna Penn, it's almost like, she told me to give myself permission to go ahead and take the time I needed, to do it right. Because you don't want to rush something and publish a crap product. Just like
right.
Just like Ford, when they when they produced the Pinto, it was a crap product, but they didn't take the time to do it right. And if you know the Pinto story, it didn't end well.
Right. Right. That's the butt of many jokes from our era, our age group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So now you've been at this about 10 years. Tell us about your book and any other stuff you've published and written.
Okay. So the first book I wrote took about 4 years. I finished it in 2016. It's not going to be published as is because I consider it a practice run.
Which is good.
Yeah. So I do plan to rewrite that and someday turn it into a 4-book series, but that's where it got started. And then I hooked up with Jay Thorne in the Career Author podcast, him and Zach, and they really boosted my indie author career. I got more involved with a few in-person, conferences, and I started meeting some people, started networking. As much as I hate the concept and the act, it's hard to do for me. But it did produce some really good connections and some really good confidence boosters. And then that's how I met Jim Kukral. And then that led to the collaboration project that we're now almost ready to publish.
Tell us about that book, and let's talk a little bit about the collaboration.
I come from, a career in the Air Force, 22 years in the Air Force, and nothing in the military gets done without teamwork. So I really learned to, appreciate that and like it a lot. So I like working with other people, whether it's my fitness business or working with, this book project. So Jim and I got together and it was his idea. He reached out and just kind of put the offer out there. I was one of the people that responded. And my goal was to not only do a teamwork project, but really to hook up with someone with a different skill set that I lacked myself and one that he lacked that I had. And we put those together. And that was one of the major goals, was to collaborate on opposite skill sets. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to say that, because a lot of authors ask about what do I do to write a novel with somebody? How do you do that? How do you handle it? And I think your approach is maybe not totally unique, but it's important, because there are too many cases where people work with somebody and they're like, oh my God, I can't stand them now. I can't believe this. So you guys both brought different strengths to the table for the story.
Yeah, that was one aspect. And I thought about it a lot. If you want to do a collaboration project, it's a mindset. You can't go into it thinking, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And if other person doesn't like it, well, then it just won't work. That's completely the wrong attitude. You have to go into a collaboration project with the attitude that we're working together. There's two sets of opinions, and there's no right or wrong answer to anything. And as long as you do that, as long as you stay flexible and have an open, minded attitude, it'll work. Anything else, and it won't work.
Right. Agreed. I haven't written with anybody, but I can definitely see that. And I know Jay and Zach talk about that quite a bit. Yep. So how did it work between you and Jim? Did you guys sit down and plan the whole book out? Who did most of the writing? Who did editing? Or did you take parts? Who developed characters? All of that jazz.
Yeah, we had a handful of Zoom meetings, and then we had one meeting in person that was in conjunction with a separate event. I actually flew out to Cleveland, and over chips and salsa and tequila shots, Jim and I had, kind of a planning meeting. And we first of all laid out, our strengths and what our primary roles would be. And then we started working on what kind of a story we wanted to tell. So it kind of evolved over a series of meetings. And, like most plans, the final product wasn't exactly what we planned, but it was pretty close. and that's fine. Nothing ever gonna. I mean, unless you're like a super meticulous anal individual, no plan will end up exactly as planned. That's just impossible
Right.
to do. But if it's close, that's fine. Plans are a guide, not a written in stone sort of thing. So, but the major thing was identifying our strengths and our roles, and then we also included, what we would do if it didn't work out. So we had a contract also that we both agreed upon and signed. Yeah.
That's nice. And I think that's important too, because I think a lot of new authors miss that point. You agents, co-authors, whatever, you should have some sort of contract. It saves, like putting a lock on your door. It keeps honest people honest, saves some of the hassle.
Well, it helps you get in your mind that, you have responsibilities. There's more than just you involved. And if it doesn't work out, you have an amicable exit strategy. And you have to keep in mind to, not take it too personal, not get upset, and realize that there's, more than one person involved. And also be okay with, if it doesn't work out, no problem, move on.
Right. So when you started writing, who came up with the main story idea, and who started writing the most, or how did that come? How did you handle that?
We decided that I was going to do most of the writing and Jim was going to do most of the marketing. And then, but the idea came from Jim. He spoke about this a lot on the Sell More Book Show podcast. People love their convenience, and this current pandemic, in retrospect, kind of played right into the themes we had already developed, which is, people are stuck inside, and now we have this delivery culture emerging. And that's actually what is happening right now in real life.
Right.
But we took it further. Our story takes place roughly 50 years in the future, where a large part of the everyday infrastructure and economy is done by delivery robots and drones of all shapes and sizes for just about everything. So that was kind of the basis of the story, all driven by artificial intelligence.
And where's the story at right now? What stage?
Yeah, we just put out the offer for ARC readers. So it's been written, it's been edited once. We got the cover, we got the blurb. Derek Murphy did a fantastic job on the cover. Brian Cohen's company did the blurb, did a really fantastic job. So we just literally, like a week or two ago, and it's like 12 November today. So we put the call out for ARCs, and we're just kind of gathering people's feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, and then we'll go from there. After we get a couple weeks, a few reviews, we'll go from there. So I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to launch soon, or if we have to go back to the revision board and do that route. One of the two.
Well, full disclosure on that, I'm one of your ARC readers, so I've got the book.
Cool.
I'm a couple chapters into it, reading. I like the concept a lot, especially the AI stuff. I'm a computer guy.
Yeah, I suspect that it's going to need a little bit more work, but I've only gotten a few reviews yet, so I'm not sure if that's indicative of one thing or another. So we want to get a few more, I hope.
Yeah, I'll push on it and try and get back to you.
Oh, great, thanks.
Yeah. Well, just another slight brag on my part, I guess. I'm an hour away from both Jay Thorne and Jim, so I love living where I live in that regard. Let me. So that makes it nice for me, I guess.
Yep. Do you see him often?
Well, not lately. I've run into Jay at several things when he does library talks and stuff like that.
Oh, gotcha.
But I haven't met Jim face to face. We just a couple emails here and there.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. He's Jim's had a hell of a year this year. I mean, the pandemic started, and then I think he had a tree fell on his house.
Yeah.
And then just a couple months ago, they discovered he had some cancer.
Yeah.
So he's had a rough damn year this year. So
Yes.
he's recovering, but I pray and hope for his total recovery. It's just so unfair, it seems.
I agree. So you better make this book really good for him, Sully, and get it out.
Well, that's our plan, and that's why I think we might have to go back and tweak it a little bit more. But we'll take the time necessary to do that before we put it out there. So yeah.
And what's the book called?
It's called Rock Rain.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So during this process, you've already mentioned a little bit of this, but your writing itself, what have you learned, and what would you do different if you went back and started this book again?
If we had to start over again right now, I would take a little bit more time and have a more solid outline. Because the outline we sketched out in retrospect was a little bit too vague, I think. And then there's always a little bit of a default uncertainty when you have more than one author. Mm-hmm. Because now you have two opinions, two brains, two experience levels or backgrounds, and I found myself, constantly wondering, well, what would Jim think? and I don't know if that's fair or not, or I don't know if that's correct or not, or the right way to think about it, but that's what happened. So I think that was a little bit of a resistance tool that worked its way into my kit, and it sometimes held things up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The thinking, not necessarily what's the reality, but what's in our own heads, keeps us back sometimes. And I say it that way because, listening to all the different podcasts, talking to all the different authors I've known and meet at various events, that seems to be a large common denominator with a lot of authors. The imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Can I really do this? All of that, the doubts creep in,
right?
Especially for new authors.
Yeah. And then if you're doing a collab project, it's that intensity is doubled.
Especially with someone like Jim, who's a name that's known within the circles.
Right. And he'd been wanting to do a fiction project for a while, but, we both also still had day jobs, and, we live 3 time zones apart. So getting together just like that was near impossible because he's a lot busier than I am. So it wasn't super easy to get together just whenever we needed to. So, a lot of things were stacked against us by accident, really.
But as you said to me earlier, you're so used to the Zoom calls. That is one benefit with all the tech we have, that you can schedule a Zoom call and talk face to face and still get things done. We need holograms next. So hopefully that's coming.
We do that, or I'm still hoping for Hyperloop travel so I can get to, other side of the country within a couple hours without going through the harassment of the airports.
Right. We need Stargate, and then we'll be good.
Well, yeah. I mean, what's the holdup?
Right. We should have had that by now.
So somebody needs to invent it.
Well, that's as easy as it's said. Just do it. So it's not quite out yet, and Jim's doing all the marketing. But for you, doing the writing, what do you use to do your writing? What software or tools?
Oh, I use Microsoft Word because that's what I grew up with, and I like it, and I can easily use it. And if I want to move things around, I do each chapter scene with a separate document, so I don't have to scroll through, 100 or 200 pages. So that's where I start, and I usually do it on my iPad to do the first drafting, and then I'll send that to my computer and do the rest of it on the computer. As far as formatting the book, I use Draft to Digital for that. It's pretty easy to do. And I don't do any formatting within Word. I'd keep it absolutely basic. No spaces, no, paragraphs, no page number, none of that stuff. I use just basic text, 12 point, times, just to keep it super simple. I did figure out that you have to do a couple carriage returns, so the ebook version has a space.
Okay.
So that took a little bit of figuring out, which is fine. Their support, customer service was really helpful with that regard. And then, like I said, Jim did the blurb and the book cover. He helped people do that. But we also used for the editing a innovative service that uses AI and software called, and that was a collaboration with First Editing and Fictionary. Have you ever heard of those?
I've got Fictionary, actually, a subscription.
Yeah. So a very useful kind of visual editing tool that you can easily move around between chapters and scenes, and a whole host of other metadata inside your book. So number of characters, the plot points, number of words per scene. I mean, the whole list goes on. It's a super awesome piece of software to use.
I got a question on Fictionary, but I got one on Word first. You said that you write each chapter or scene in a different document. So at the end of the book, you have like 30 or so documents. Does Word offer the ability somehow to combine those or look at them in like a binder or some way so you're not going through a folder on your hard drive with different documents?
No, I just, if I have to, I just do it manually. After I do all those separate chapters in separate documents, then I take, a day and format it into one document.
Okay.
Now,
well,
I'm the type of person that I don't mind doing that. I'm not so busy that I have to worry about, using a different piece of software, or that, will combine it automatically. I don't really care about that stuff. I like having total control, and I don't mind, getting a glass of getting a beer and just cutting and pasting a whole bunch of times. I don't mind that.
Got it. Okay. And one of the interesting thing is, I don't know if you've ever dealt with this, but if you go with Ingram Spark, they have this new book builder that they help create the whole print book. And the one method of getting things formatted correctly is each chapter being a separate document. So you upload a separate document for each chapter, and then you could reorder them or whatever. I mean, you're set up perfectly for that, for getting things printed through Ingram Spark with that.
Yeah, and that's something that's probably one of the next steps. Right now, our book that Jim and I are working on is going to be ebook only, but depending on feedback and success or lack of, we probably go that route for a paperback version eventually. I especially want to focus on, I'm really impressed with Joanna's plan. She goes wide and multi-format. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of my plan as well. So multi-format means also not just ebook, but large print books as well, because I've noticed to myself, the older I get, the worse my eyesight gets.
Right.
And I freaking hate that, because I fully suspect, let me give you a little secret here. I plan to live to be 120, but I'll probably be blind by 90 at the current rate. So I'm gonna have to learn to dictate a book someday.
Right, and that's something I'd like to work on too. And I bet Jim has no problem agreeing with going wide. That's probably definitely on his radar to do.
I'm not sure. Lately, he's been more focused on his health, so we haven't done a lot with the book because of that. And it's more important for him to get, recover and get healthy first.
Right.
But I actually think that once we launch, we'll probably go KU for the first 90 days.
And I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, just to get kind of like a running start, so to speak, and then reevaluate. I'm actually a huge fan of going wide, because I think Amazon is leaning towards treating authors like crap.
Right.
A lot of their moves the last couple of years to me, indicate less and less caring and support for the indie author. That's
And
just
I
my
think
interpretation.
And I think like Kobo and Drafted Digital are jumping on that, and they're trying really hard. But the reality, and I think you're right. And I know Jim says it a lot on the show, and others do too. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. But if
Right.
90% of the market is in one basket, then you should have your eggs in that basket at least. And I think it makes sense to go with KU to start with and see how that goes. Though I've heard that if you do like a series and you end up pulling it out of KU, it actually ends up hurting you because the readers want all the books and they don't want to then have to go look for stuff later elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's where you start getting into, an endless rabbit holes of, well, what if, and if I do that,
Right.
what about this? And you can get totally lost in that. But part of my plan is not just for this one book, but for the other series I'm writing, is to not only go wide, platform and format wise, but also to get outside the U.S. borders.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon may have an advantage here stateside, but that doesn't mean they have an advantage in the rest of the planet, because
Right.
in a lot of places they don't even exist.
Right.
And that's where Kobo comes in, and a lot of other platforms. So my plan is to go fully worldwide, and take advantage of new and emerging technologies to translate the book as well as distribute to outside of the States. So yeah.
And Google just announced that they're doing 70% royalties, and every Android phone comes with Google on it. And I was reading another news thing where there are several countries in the world now that they skipped over everybody having desktops and laptops, and they went straight from barely having a phone to everything being done mobile. So there's billions of people with a Google and Android on their phones. So
That makes total sense, because who wants to carry around a desktop in their pocket? Nobody.
right. Well,
And
I'm a tech guy and I do development and coding, so it's difficult to do from a phone, but I can do it.
yeah, true. And I find it really interesting that people read books on their phone. I have a phone, but it's too damn small to read, so that's never going to happen with me. But
Right.
a lot of people do. So yeah, it's going to be, I think, advantageous for any author to eventually go, multi-language, multi-platform, as many different avenues and outlets as possible, including libraries and their own website. So that's the long-term strategy for me.
And I agree. I'm looking into getting into that more. For me, I write middle grade, and it actually turns out that middle graders will want to get the physical book before they read it on ebook. So it's definitely something I've looked at. And two of my kids have eye issues. So large print makes sense for me to get into,
Yep.
because my kids would have needed that when they were younger. So all these things, there's just so many options. It can get overwhelming. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on an author's, stage. A new author, I think it does make a lot of sense to, write 3 books and to start out in KU. Mostly to get, to kind of just grow your audience, get a little bit of recognition, gather reviews, maybe start, generating some income, and then seriously consider, as more books, as you write more books, seriously consider going wider and more platforms. It's a step-by-step process, and it really has to be done, author by author, because everybody's a little bit different.
Right.
But it has to be, at least thought out and a plan made to follow.
And genre too. Like, middle grade, like I said, print books makes a lot of sense, but I don't think necessarily romance may make as much sense because they seem to like the subscription model.
Right. And that's one of the tough things to do, is people always say, well, know your audience and know your genre. But I've noticed there's not a whole hell of a lot that actually teaches you how to do that out there. You really have to, you have to look at, dozens of sources and kind of piecemeal all that together, because that's just not intuitive. I don't care who you are.
I agree. That's funny you say that, because I've actually been working on an article that addresses that exact issue. Everyone says figure out your genre, but that's as far as it goes. There's no how do you figure out your genre and what, all of that. So
yeah, and the biggest one for me is find your audience. Okay, well, that makes sense to say that, and it's a whole lot easier to say than do. Right. But I have really struggled to find any useful, coherent, one location place that shows you or just tells you or teaches you how to find your audience. That's really elusive, and it might be out there. I don't know, but so far, I've learned a little bit, but it certainly wasn't easy, and it sure as hell wasn't all in one place.
Right. Definitely. And that's something actually I've been exploring more of myself. So maybe next time we talk, we'll both have a little more insight into that.
Yeah, hopefully, because I'm going to need it soon.
So, do you and Jim have any plans for a next book, or what's your thoughts for your next book?
I wrote this book with two things in mind. One, I wrote it so it would be easy for a movie producer that wanted to make it into a movie. So it's not so adventurous or so outlandish that it couldn't be done on a visual basis. And then I also wrote it with an interesting backstory and possibility for two more stories. So it could be a 3-book trilogy. But that'll all hinge on how the first one goes, and what Jim wants to do. I'm not sure he wants to do 2 more. I don't know yet. We haven't gotten to that point yet. So if people like it and we want to go forward, we may do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You said you have read a lot. You had a lot of books. What's some of your favorite books and favorite authors?
Oh, probably the top is The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Those are the only books I've ever read more than once.
Wow.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people, reading their favorite books multiple times. I'm like, how on earth do you do that? Because there's so many more books to go read.
Right.
I just don't get that. I mean, they might be good books, but damn, there's a lot more to read. So I've only done that once. So that's probably among my very favorites. But I typically go for authors. So Tolkien is one of my favorites. The guy that wrote the Honor Harrington series is one of my favorites. I forget the name right now. David something, I think. I don't remember. Anyway, so the Honor Harrington series, the great military sci-fi space opera sort of thing. Terry Brooks, one of my favorites. He wrote a really interesting. I think it was like first person past tense or something to that effect. Sci-fi, kind of sort of like a middle grade sci-fi. A lot of fun and really different from what his fantasy stuff was. But yeah, he's one of my favorite authors. I actually got to meet him at a local book signing event a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
Here in Spokane, yeah. So super nice guy. But any kind of, mostly I read science fiction, military or adventure. Right now, Lindsay Broker is one of my favorite sci-fi writers. She just wrapped up her Star Kingdom series, fantastic series. I think the last book in that series was some of the best stuff that she ever wrote. And she's got a couple books out there, so that's
she's doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's saying a lot, because I've kind of followed her books, and each one gets a lot better. It's incredible to watch that. So yeah, those are among the favorite books.
Personal question: have you read or know the author Ian Douglas?
Heard of it. I don't know if I've read any or not.
Okay. I actually know him. He was like the first author I met. And that's kind of like, I took it. I'd been thinking about writing, and then I met him, and I was like, okay, well, there's my sign from whatever being above telling me that, hey, you should go write. I took it as a sign. So, but he writes sci-fi military type stuff. Out in Spokane, do you have any left favorite bookstores?
I used to live near one of the Barnes and Noble, and I was a regular there because I really enjoy cover art.
Okay.
So I used to go there once a week, get a coffee, and just look at every cover on the shelf. And I always stuck to the sci-fi section because that's what I read. I really don't care about anything else. So I always peruse the cover art. I look for new books, and then I go, to Apple and buy it online because I don't buy physical books anymore. But I moved away from there, so I don't actually go there anymore. I'm not even sure if it's open because of recent events anyway.
Yeah.
There's also an indie bookstore in downtown Spokane called Auntie's Books. In this ancient old building, the floors creak. They're not even, but super nice people. They got a lot of books, also a lot of used books. So that's a fun place to go as well.
Okay. All right. So, Sully, before we wrap things up and close this portion of our long talk out, do you have any last minute advice for some new authors?
Yeah, I would say, if you're new to this and any kind of frustrated, don't be. Take a deep breath, give yourself permission to, learn as you go and enjoy the process, and don't impose an artificial deadline. Just let it happen, and it'll come.
Okay. All right. And where can we find you online?
You can check out my very simple self-done website at my author pen name, which is toryelement.com. Up there I have a couple of anthologies I've been involved in, a couple of short stories you can download for free. And you don't even have to join my list if you don't want to, but that's an option as well. And then there's also a link to the art copies for the book Jim and I wrote. So pretty simple stuff. And then I think there's one section where I hint at my upcoming fitness website and course coming online soon too.
Okay, great. Well, I'll put links in the episode show notes and on the page for that.
Oh, great.
Sorry, I appreciate you taking some time to talk today. What everyone doesn't know listening to this is we were talking on fitness for a while and other things with stuff going on in the country. So maybe someday we'll have some of that as extras and bloopers.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. We'll probably look at it and go, wow, we talked about what and what did we talk? Yeah. So, all right. Well, great. So I appreciate you taking some time and you have a really great day.
Thanks, Steve. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.